On behalf of all the people of Clear Lake United Methodist Church, I want to welcome you to this fourth installment of what we're calling Dinner and Discourse. These evenings are an opportunity to gather around important conversations that shape our faith life together in the world. These events are sponsored by the Committee on Church and Society. We are a group of Clear Lake United Methodist church members who are committed to exploring how our faith intersects with social issues. The Committee on Church and Society is described in the United Methodist Book of Discipline. Its purpose is to educate and lead the congregation in advocating for peace and justice, guided by the social principles and resolutions of the General Conference of the United Methodist Church. Our Committee on Church and Society helps followers of Jesus engage with racial reconciliation, justice, peace, creation care, and the common good through learning, advocacy, and service. At this time, I'm going to ask the members of the Committee on Church and Society to take a moment and stand and be recognized. Let's show them our appreciation. They put together the dinner tonight. And helped to make all of this possible. If you are interested in more information about the Committee on Church and Society, please speak to me or one of the other members of this committee. Also, I want to take a moment and thank our staff members present. Thank you for your presence. I see Curtis over here and Rachel, and I saw Sheila, all of whom have been running around trying to get a few things lined out and put together to make sure everything came off without a hitch. Of course, Chidi's here with our Ministry of Communication, ensuring that we do have a video of this evening to share, and I know that the facilities team and others have been hard at work, so it's good to be together. Let's take a moment and show them our appreciation. As you know, an event like this evening takes extra work from each of them, and we are grateful. We're also grateful that you've chosen to be here this evening for this important conversation, and I hope that tonight sparks thoughtful reflection and meaningful dialogue. I also want to invite you back this spring as we will continue this series. We have some initial conversations, but no finalized dates yet. As those draw nearer in the new year, we'll be letting people know. We'll be starting it back up in the March timeframe. The schedule is yet to be finalized. But tonight we are blessed to welcome Melissa Prentice, the Outreach, Education, and Prevention Director from Bay Area Turning Point, who will help us understand more the realities of domestic violence and the ways we can respond as a community of faith. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we are blessed to have Melissa here with us to lead our discourse. We are so grateful for the work that her group, Bay Area Turning Point, does, and the many ways their work support our community. Before she begins, I want to do something that has become our custom at these, for us to share a little bit about what the social principles of the United Methodist Church say about topics such as domestic violence. In the section on the nurturing community, our church declares, we recognize that family violence and abuse in all its forms, verbal, psychological, physical, sexual, is detrimental to the covenant of the human community. We affirm the right of all persons to live without fear of violence or abuse, and we urge the church to provide a safe environment, counseling, and support for victims. You can find that in paragraph 161G of the United Methodist Book of Discipline. The social principles also make clear that abuse is never acceptable. It states, we oppose abuse and sexual assault of children, women, or men, as well as all forms of sexual misconduct. And further, we encourage the church to provide a safe environment and support for victims, to advocate for just laws, and to hold abusers accountable. What this means is that as United Methodists, we are not neutral on this subject. We are called to be advocates for safety, justice, and healing. We are called to create spaces where survivors are believed, protected, and supported. So as we share this meal and open ourselves to learning this evening, we do so anchored in the conviction that God calls us to resist violence, to seek justice, and to embody the love of Christ in real and practical ways. And for those who have not been here before, I wanted to let you explain how you can ask questions. As the event goes on, you'll notice on your table there are some pens and some note cards. Feel free to any question that comes up that you would like answered. You can write them on one of these note cards at the end. Those will be collected and then shared by two of our clergy colleagues that are here that will help me with those, and then read aloud so that Melissa can answer. At this time, I'm going to ask Patsy Chapelier had a presentation she would like to make to Melissa. As Melissa comes forward, I wanted to invite Patsy to make this presentation.
Okay, here comes the bag lady. Melissa? Oops, put this down where we can hear. A little shorter. We usually deliver these. Oh, I know that you're almost out. This is something we support as Clear Lake United Methodist Church. These are some of our stuffed animals. We have the Sowing Seeds of Love project, and we make stuffed animals. They have children come with these abused women. Those children need something to be a lovey. And these are our loveys from us in Christian love.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Yes, we do have many children who come in with their parents or with their mothers or fathers who come into our shelter. So that will be greatly appreciated. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So my name is Melissa Prentice. I am the Outreach Education and Prevention Director for Bay Area Turning Point. I have been there for 15 years now. And tonight we're going to be talking about what domestic violence looks like, because I think people have an idea in their mind of what domestic violence looks like, and a lot of times that is the physical. But we're not looking at the verbal, at the emotional, at the spiritual, at the digital, at the sexual abuse. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like tonight. You have handouts at your seats. If anybody needs more, I think I have a few more. But also those particular handouts are very small up here, so you may not be able to read them up here. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So if you're not familiar with Bay Area Turning Point, we are a nonprofit organization that was incorporated in 1991, and we provide domestic violence and sexual assault, crisis intervention services, and wraparound services. So what that means is we're going to help people in that immediate crisis, but once we help them get out of that crisis, we're still going to provide services to help them with recovery. And we're going to be talking more about our services as I get towards the end. Our mission is advocating to end domestic and sexual violence. Our vision is peace for every woman, every child, every man, every day. So as I stated, we do have sometimes men come through our program. We do accept men into our shelter because it does happen to men as well. Domestic violence does not discriminate, and neither do we. So what is, let me get that off the screen there. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is defined as a pattern of abusive behavior used to gain or maintain control over a partner. So you do hear numerous terms used interchangeably. You hear domestic violence, you hear family violence, you hear intimate partner violence, you hear dating violence. All of these are different in their own way. Domestic violence probably goes a little bit closer with intimate partner violence, but it does still encompass that family violence piece. I'm not going to go into all the subtle differences of the definitions tonight, but just a kind of brief overview of that. Family violence, we're looking more at family members. So immediate household family members. This can include spouses, but it can also include parents, siblings, people in your immediate household, and that's the key is in the household, as defined by the Texas Family Code. And I kind of emphasize that because that can also include roommates. A lot of people don't know that. If there's abuse from somebody that you're living with, whether there's a relationship there or not, it can still be considered family violence if you're under the same roof. Domestic violence, intimate partner violence are leaning more towards a romantic relationship. more of a serious nature, spouses, people that have been together for a long time, people living together, may share a child together. And then we also have dating violence, which they may not, the relationship may be a little bit newer. They're in more of the dating phase. They haven't moved really into that marriage or intimate partner phase. So what are some of the forms of domestic violence that we see? Like I said, there's several different forms of domestic violence. We have the physical, which is what most people know. That's whenever you are causing physical harm to somebody, whether that be hitting, kicking, punching. Domestic violence or physical violence is probably what most people think about whenever they're thinking domestic violence. But we also have the verbal and emotional. So this is where the abusers are putting the person down, making them feel bad about themselves. I'll go more into that because there's a whole section on that power and control wheel that I handed out to y'all on verbal and emotional abuse. Same with the psychological. This is where we see the gaslighting come in, making somebody thinking that making somebody think that they're crazy, playing mind games with them, making them feel like they're the ones responsible for the abuse, whenever nobody deserves abuse. We see economic abuse. So I'm going to quiz y'all real quick. What percentage of domestic violence relationships do you think we see economic abuse in? Y'all just throw out a number at me.
80%.
I heard one over here that's very close.
What was it?
99%. 99% of domestic violence relationships also have economic abuse, which we're going to talk about more here in just a second. With this being a digital age, we're seeing a lot more digital abuse, where they're using social media, they're using email, phones, text, but it doesn't stop there. Even your in-home security systems, the cameras, Siri, Alexa, Hey Google. I always joke around about this, not about using that for surveillance, but I remember one time whenever they first came out with like the Ring cameras and all that stuff, my brother and sister-in-law, they weren't married yet, they were living together and they were engaged, but one day my brother thought it would be funny, they had a camera in the house so they could keep an eye on the dog to make sure she wasn't destroying anything. One day my sister-in-law was at home cleaning, hanging out with the dog, and my brother decides he's gonna mess with her and just goes, "Hey!" in the camera. Scared the living daylights out of her. But unfortunately, abusers aren't using it to play pranks on their wives like my brother did. They're using it to surveil them around the home. They're using those Ring cameras to surveil them around the home. So, as much as technology is a blessing, it makes things easier for some people. I'm not really like that tech savvy yet, but it does make it easier for some people. It also makes it easier to abuse. We see sexual abuse. So this is, I'm sure y'all are familiar with sexual abuse. There's different types of sexual assault, which is going to be an entire training on its own, which I'm more than happy to come back and talk about. But sexual abuse, that's basically any kind of sexual contact or behavior without the explicit consent of the recipient. And there are different elements that go into consent. One of the big things is, was the consent given freely? Or was it coerced? And that's where a lot of people have a hard time differentiating between was this sexual assault and was it consensual? Because what oftentimes happens is somebody will say yes, but they felt coerced, or they felt afraid. They felt like something bad was going to happen if they say no. This is a question we ask people whenever they call our hotline. Have you been forced to have sex whenever you did not want to? And a lot of times the answer that we get is, well, that's kind of a hard question to answer because I do it to avoid consequences, which tells me it was not consensual. I'm very transparent about the fact that I am a domestic violence and a sexual assault survivor. And because of that coercion right there and the trauma response that I experienced, I didn't even realize that it was sexual assault until 7 years after it had happened. 7 years. I was 15. I did not realize till I was in my 20s what had happened. Because I didn't understand trauma responses and I didn't understand consent. And whenever we hear about trauma responses, we're familiar with fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of people don't know about fawn. which is where you basically go along with the action to keep yourself safe. It's a survival method. So again, I can stand up here all night. I did an entire webinar on this, about an hour and a half long, about a month ago. I can stand up here all night and talk about that, but that would be a training for another day. And then we have spiritual abuse, where they will use somebody's faith or they will use culture in order to execute these abusive actions. And so these are all different forms that we see domestic violence taking, which we're going to go into a little bit more detail. And now y'all, I think y'all can see why I give y'all the handout, because that is very hard to read. It's very tiny. I can make it bigger. So this is what we call the power and control wheel, because if you remember in the definition, domestic violence is all about power and control. So what does power and control look like? It looks like using intimidation. So this can be using intimidating gestures. This could be destroying property, throwing things, displaying weapons, abusing pets. We were just over here at the table talking about my dog, who I love so much, but drove me crazy last night because it kept me up all night. But I can't say that if I were in an abusive relationship and I had to leave the dog behind, I would leave. I don't think I would, because I love that dog so much. I'm not going to leave him by himself with an abusive person, because they will use pets in order to get you to stay. They will abuse pets in order to get you to come back if you have left. About 65% of people will not leave an abusive relationship because it requires them to leave the pet behind. So that's something to think about. Using the emotional abuse. So we kind of talked about this. This is where the abuser is putting the victim down, calling them names, humiliating them, shaming them, making them feel guilty, playing those mind games with them, the gaslighting. That's what we see with the emotional abuse. Isolation. So this is what we see in the majority of domestic violence relationships. The abuser will isolate the victim, and they will do so very subtly. It's not going to be very obvious at first, but eventually they start telling them what they can wear, where they can go, who they can follow on social media, or who can follow them. Just controlling every aspect of their life, and eventually they will slowly but surely separate the person from any support system that they might have. And so that makes it difficult for somebody to leave whenever they have no support system. And then we add in that economic abuse, which I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we see that economic abuse added in, where the abuser has control over all of the family finances, won't let the victim work, won't let them have access to any of the family funds. So, and then you also have children that you have to think about. A lot of times the abusers will try to use the children against the victim. They will try to threaten to take custody. They might make the victim feel guilty about leaving with the children. So you take these things, you have no support system, you have no funds, and now you have to make the hard choice of, well, my children aren't being hurt, so do I leave and get out of this abusive situation, or do I stay where my children have a roof over their head and food in their stomachs? So this is the choice that we're asking people to make whenever they call our hotline looking for help. So that's why we don't tell people, well, just pack up your things and leave. We, don't know if we have space available, but even if we do, they're having to make that hard choice. They're having to make a very hard choice. I did skip around a little bit, so I'm going to go back to the ones that I did skip. The minimizing, denying, and blaming. So this is basically where the abuser's trying to make light of the abuse. They're trying to make it seem like the concerns are not that serious. Like, they're not really abusive. The person is just making things up in their mind, which also goes back to that gaslighting. They even start making the victim feel like it's their fault they're being abused. And whenever you start being told something so many times, unfortunately, your brain gets rewired to start believing it. And so this makes it difficult to leave. The next one, using male privilege. So I don't want the men in here thinking that we're picking on y'all. But statistically speaking, the majority of victims are women, the majority of perpetrators are men. That is statistics, that is not my personal opinion. But this does go both ways. It really does. And also, I did not create this, so this is not my fault that they use that. But this is basically where the abuser is treating the victim like a servant, making all the decisions around the home. Basically, master of the castle type thing. And also being the one to define very rigid gender roles in the home. So society as a whole still has, while we see them shifting, society as a whole still has pretty rigid gender roles for people in the home. A lot of times men are expected to go out and work, to provide, to make the decisions. Women are expected to stay home, take care of the children, cook, clean, keep the house up. But, we've also kind of seen that shift now where you do see more women working. And so then there comes the expectation of, well, I got to go to work and then come home and do all of this. But unfortunately, while we see some of these roles shifting, it still hasn't shifted enough. And then lastly, coercion and threats. So we talked a little bit about coercion whenever we were talking about the sexual abuse, but this is basically talking about threats, making and or carrying out threats, making somebody feel like they are going to be in harm's way if they try to leave or say no to something. Oftentimes we also see perpetrators will threaten to commit suicide if the victim leaves. They use that as a method to try to get them to stay. They may try to report them to welfare. They may try to make them do illegal things. They may make them drop charges, and they're using some form of threat in order to do so. So these are some of the ways that we see power and control manifesting in domestic violence relationships. So now you can see it's not always physical, but a lot of times it will lead to the physical, which we see in this next slide, which is the cycle of abuse. So a common misconception is abuse is a one-off thing. Domestic violence is not a one-off thing. In the definition, it states it's a pattern. It's a pattern of abuse, and this is the pattern. This is the cycle. A lot of times the relationship is starting off in this honeymoon phase, where it seems like the fairy tale relationship that you see in all the Hallmark movies. But then we see tension start building. So if you look at the power and control wheel and you look at this wheel side by side, you'll start seeing some of those things that are within the power and control wheel falling into the different phases here. So with the batterer, we start seeing them isolate the victim. We start seeing them withdraw affection, start putting the victim down, humiliating them, shaming them, destroying property, criticizing them, gaslighting them. But on the victim's end, they're trying to keep the peace within the household. There's a feeling of walking on eggshells. So you'll see them try to calm the batterer down. If the batterer is saying they talk too much, they may become more silent. If they're saying they're not talking enough, they may become more talkative. They may try to keep the kids more calm. They may be more agreeable, or they may withdraw. They may try to reason. They may try to cook the batterer their favorite meal just to keep the peace. But again, there's this feeling of walking on eggshells within the home. And then we see the explosion phase. This is where we see that physical violence occur. So this can look like hitting. It says choking, but that should really say strangulation. I'm not going to go into all the logistics of the difference, but choking for my medical professionals over here, that's usually whenever something's being lodged in your airway versus strangulation where the airway is being cut off from the exterior. We also see humiliation, rape, imprisonment, use of weapons, and other abusive actions. So in legal terms, this is where we would consider it aggravated abuse, whether it be aggravated assault or aggravated sexual assault. The victim's response, this is where they may have had it. They may leave. They may call the police. They may file charges. A neighbor may file charges or call the police. They may try to calm the batterer down. They may try to reason with them, but this is usually that phase where they're fed up and they've had it. Now, what happens is we get back to this honeymoon or reconciliation phase, where the batterer is apologizing, begging for forgiveness, promising to go to church, promising to get counseling, They are trying to declare their love. They're trying to get family support. They give the impression that they are trying to change their ways. And that's where the victim becomes more hopeful again. They start to think that, okay, maybe that was a one-off thing. Maybe they are for real this time, that it's not going to happen again. They will set up the counseling appointments. Again, they start feeling hopeful, but then that cycle starts all over again. And then it keeps going and going and going. And what tends to happen is if there's not a consistent pattern, then they don't see it as a cycle. They don't see this as abuse. Also, if there is no physical violence, a lot of victims do not see it as abuse. They deny the fact that they are a victim of domestic violence. Whenever sometimes those emotional actions, those psychological actions, the isolation can be worse. Now, of course, I'm sure some people are asking what's worse than being physically harmed? The psychological piece of things. And if you've ever been through a situation where somebody was playing mind games with you, you just want to stop. You really just want to stop, because those mind games, the psychological piece of things, can be much, much harder to heal in the long run. So what are some warning signs that we can look out for? It can be very challenging to recognize domestic violence because, I mean, of course, physical signs are going to be your most obvious sign. But a lot of times abusers are going to try to be smart about it and not make physical markings where people are going to see them. So things to look for is one partner excessively controlling everything. For example, are you having a conversation with a couple and one partner will speak for the other person and won't let them have their own opinion or let them speak for themselves? Have you noticed any kind of isolation from friends and family? Is one partner constantly apologizing for the other partner's actions? Does one partner tend to speak for the other partner? Talked about that. Are there any unexplained injuries? Now, what I do want to say about this one real quick, if you see unexplained injuries, that doesn't automatically mean jump to, oh my God, this is domestic violence. And I'll give y'all a quick example. I joke around about the fact that I am my own worst hazard. And what I mean by that is usually if I have an injury, I did it myself on accident. So last Thanksgiving, or right after Thanksgiving, I'm trying to decorate my house for Christmas because I just wanted to Christmas it all up. And actually, usually I take my Halloween decorations and just kind of Christmas them up because it's different. I think it's interesting. So I have like these decorative little skulls that I'll put Santa hats on. I decided to do something a little different this year. And I go to put one of those up, which, I weighed it. It was about 2 pounds. It falls off of the shelf that I put it on and cracks me right here on my head. I ended up getting a concussion from that. I had a little gash there. And then probably as I started getting over that, one day I'm in my room. I had like this yoga app. This was before I actually joined the studio. Had this little app and we ended up on our back and I was like, that wasn't long enough. I'm going to do another one. Picked up my phone. I'm looking for another one. Guess what happens? Phone drops right on my lip. So I have to go to this workshop. It wasn't really a conference. It was more a workshop with a bunch of people that don't know me very well with a busted lip and explain to them, I swear to God, the only person who hurt me was me. So all that to say, a lot of times you're going to, actually pretty much every time, if you see physical injuries, you're going to see some of these other things accompanying it. Now, of course, if you see physical injuries, ask about it. Don't just brush it off and be like, oh yeah, Melissa said, she hurts herself all the time. Don't just jump to that conclusion. You can ask about it, but I would look for some of these other signs as well. Do you see one partner diminishing the opinion of the other partner? Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you're just charged about this, right? Does one partner appear to be quiet or withdrawn whenever the other partner is around? Have you noticed that with somebody who's usually talkative and lively, whenever their partner's around, they're not like that? And is there one partner who's once involved in many of the church activities or activities in general and is now withdrawing from those activities because that can point to isolation? But again, a lot of these, you're gonna see more than one. You're gonna see more than one. Because people could be going through things, and they may just not have the time or the energy to be participating in what they once did. But that's where the conversation can start. You can ask the question, which we'll get to in just a moment on how you can approach some of those conversations. But whenever you talk about any kind of abuse, domestic violence, it is important that you understand safety. So what I usually tell people is, if you're concerned about somebody's safety, refer them to us, and we can help them come up with a safety plan. Because what people tend to do, is anybody in this room a fixer? Like, people come to you with a problem and you want to fix it for them? I know there is more than one person in here that's like that. Y'all raise your hands, because I'm the same way. You can't fix it. You can't fix it. And so what we do not create their safety plan for them. We create it with them. So what that means is, we're not in their situation. We can throw out our safety tips all day long, but they know their situation better than we do, because they're the ones that are in it. They are the experts at their own situations. And so it's important that while we help them brainstorm, while we throw out tips that we know of, ultimately we're allowing them to drive that plan. So, but that being said, if you come across somebody and you want to try to plan with them a little bit before referring them to us or another organization, some physical safety strategies, keeping valuables and important documents in a safe place, identifying safe people and places. And this is why I love coming to churches, because this should be a safe place for somebody. And I believe that y'all have created, just in talking over here and with some of the other members that I've talked to before, I can feel confident in sending somebody here and saying, this is a safe place for you to go. This is a place where they will listen to you, where they will validate your situation, and they will help you. So churches, I love sending people to churches because I feel like that is a safe place. Because the police station may not always be a safe place, especially if their abuser is the police, or is a judge, or is somebody who is a first responder. You want to make sure that people have a support system. And, you know, I know this puts a lot of pressure on people, but if somebody comes to you and says, I don't have a support system, you can be the support system. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It can just be one person. Now, I'm not saying don't start giving people money that you don't know. Don't put people up in your home that you don't know, because you got to keep yourself safe as well. But you can guide them. You can guide people to a safe situation and help them through their situation. You want to become familiar with resources that can help. And we are one of those resources. I'm not going to say we're the only ones, but we are a resource in this area. Our donation center, where I'm housed, is just right up the street on Hercules. Our administrative building is just a little further up the road, right off NASA. So we're very close in this area, and we're happy to have them come in so we can help them. We do tell people to observe patterns and schedules of their abuser, because if they are ready to leave and they do have an escape plan in place, maybe while they know the abuser is going to be gone, it's going to be the best time to try to get out. But on top of that, I also say contact the local police department and see if they do a civil standby. Not all police departments do this, so that's why I say call ahead and try to figure it out. But this is where they will send an officer to your home and let me be clear about the fact, it is not a long period of time. You may get 5 minutes, you may get 20 minutes, but they're basically there to make sure you are able to get out of your home safely, and the abuser will not touch you. Now, I do let people know that this is a very short window, because they do need to know that this is not, you got time to pack up your entire house, load up a U-Haul, and leave. This means you have time to grab a bag of clothes that hopefully is already packed, but if not, you know, grab what you can within that short period of time, get the kids and get out. We can, what I love about Bay Area Turning Point is we can help them replenish what they may have lost, but sometimes there are things that are so sentimental in the home. Again, another barrier to people leaving, because they don't want to leave their stuff behind. I know I have not evacuated during hurricanes before because I didn't want to leave my stuff behind. There are some things that are very valuable to me. And it's the same thing whenever people are leaving a domestic violence situation. They may have things that are very important to them that they do not want to leave behind. Especially maybe if they own their own home. They don't want to leave their home behind because they worked really hard to get that home. So these are things to take into consideration if you do try to give people these safety tips and they're not accepting them. Like, so as I go through these, I'm going to be throwing out some barriers you might hit, but also how to understand those a little bit better. I do tell people to try to seek out a place ahead of time to go, because I do know that a lot of the shelters unfortunately remain full. There are 330 domestic violence beds in Harris County.
Oh my goodness.
That's it.
330?
330.
That's all?
Yes. There are thousands of people that are seeking shelter space. So a lot of us have developed housing programs where we're able to provide rental assistance for them. But again, we're still very limited on units. We're very limited on funds. And so it is essential that if they are leaving, that they are looking for a place to go ahead of time. And so that's where you can brainstorm who is a safe person that you can stay with. Is it family? Is it friends? Are there people that are a safe harbor for somebody? You want to seek out information about protective orders. That is something that Bay Area Turning Point does assist with. A lot of people, whenever they hear about domestic violence, they say, oh, go get a restraining order. Not understanding that the two are not interchangeable. Restraining orders are different than protective orders. Protective orders are for domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, and stalking. They are free. They go through the DA's office. And while it is a civil order, if it is violated, it's criminal consequences. So they'll get a pretty hefty fine if they violate it one time. If they violate it twice, they can be facing prison time. The thing with protective orders is the victim has to understand that they also have to abide by that protective order. So while it does bar the perpetrator from contacting or coming around the victim also cannot be contacting the perpetrator or coming around them. It does only cover certain areas, home, work, and school. So unfortunately, it doesn't cover church. So if they do come to the same church, that's where you can work on safety with them, on how do you avoid being around each other. So, and again, it's a lot of information that goes into protective orders, which we provide all of that whenever our advocates are meeting with people. But that is the order that you want them to try to get, and we do assist with those for Galveston County and Harris County. And then lastly, if you have children, you want to make sure that you're developing a safety plan with them. So children, it's important that they know how to call 911 in case of emergency. It's also important that they know what to tell the dispatcher, or at least basic information, like the names of the people in the home, the address. Make sure they know to go unlock the door for the first responders that are coming. Another story, whenever I was younger, I think elementary school, definitely elementary school. If I didn't know this by middle school, then there was probably an issue. But I had a friend of mine, I was probably about 5 or 6, and my grandparents were visiting, and I was like, yeah, my Grammy and Pop are here. And she goes, oh yeah, what's your Grammy's name? And I was like, Grammy. She's like, no, but what's her name? I'm like, Grammy! I'm 5 years old, so like at that point I'm just like, why are you asking me this question? I already answered, right? I had no idea that my grandmother's name was Mary. And so it's important that they understand that mommy and daddy's names are not mommy and daddy, right? It's important that they know their parents' names. That way they can tell the first responders whenever they get there. But you don't want to just plan for physical safety. You also want to plan for emotional safety. So again, going back to the support system, identify and focusing on strengths, because that will help somebody become more resilient and come out of the situation. Practicing self-care and self-compassion, and that is not just for the people that are in the situation, it's for the people helping too. Because what happens is whenever you're in this helping profession, you can start experiencing something called vicarious trauma, which is basically where if you're faced with traumatic situations on a regular basis, it starts to kind of rub off on you. You start to feel that trauma. So you have to take care of yourself too. Seek out counseling services. Pay attention to body cues. I know my therapist tells me all the time, and I'm just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then one day, as I was really stressed out about something, I started feeling a lot of tension in my shoulders. I was like, oh, that's what she's talking about. So paying attention to pain that you're feeling in the body, and where you're feeling it, and what's going on in your mind as you're feeling it. Identifying triggers, and then identifying strategies that have worked before in crisis. Most people that come to us, this is not the first time they've been in crisis. So what's worked before? How did you keep yourself emotionally safe before? And that kind of helps them develop their strategy. And the important thing about having a plan in place ahead of time is think about the last time you were in crisis. Because I know everybody in here has been in crisis at one point in time or another. Were you able to think of a solid, outlined, detailed plan? Or were you thinking of, oh my God, I gotta get out of this crisis? You're thinking, how am I gonna get out of this crisis? Right? You're not thinking of a solid, detailed plan. So we try to be proactive about this. Now, lastly, before we kind of jump, what time do we end?
10 to 15 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll take questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, because this, I think, is one of my last slides. Then I want to do just a quick table discussion at y'all's tables. So, preventing violence, this is more the area that my department works with. We're trying to basically get to the root causes of why people are violent before they become violent. So you have different levels of prevention. You have tertiary, secondary, and primary. So tertiary prevention is kind of that longer term prevention, like long-term counseling for something. I stated that my victimization, the sexual assault happened whenever I was 15. The domestic violence happened at the ages 18 to 20. I just started seeing a counselor maybe 3 years ago. So that's kind of more that longer term, and I'm going to have to remain in counseling probably for a while in order to fully heal from what I have gone through, because unfortunately I waited a really long time. But people do that because they think, oh, I'm fine. I can deal with this on my own. I highly recommend counseling for people that have been through trauma because it really does help you understand some of those things that I was talking about on the last slide. Like understanding those body cues, understanding those triggers, and then being able to effectively work with those whenever you do feel yourself slipping into crisis. Secondary prevention is more of what we do. So that's pretty much that immediate crisis intervention. Getting somebody into a shelter, getting somebody into rental assistance, getting somebody into that immediate counseling, working with the safety planning, those are more immediate interventions. And then primary prevention, this is the difficult one. This is getting ahead of the problem before it starts. So this is why in the prevention work that we do, we try to target children because we don't want them to get to that point where they will eventually abuse somebody. Not saying that all children will, but there are different risk factors that go into the possibility that they could become an abuser as they grow older. Witnessing abuse in the home is one of the biggest ones. Witnessing or experiencing abuse in the home, unfortunately, is one of the biggest ones for not only becoming a perpetrator, but also becoming a victim in the future. So we want to make sure that they have the interventions needed if they've seen it. What do they have exposure to? Do they have exposure to things like pornography or sexually explicit materials? Do they understand safety and consent? These are the things. So we don't go in and talk about sexual education. We talk about things like healthy relationships with children. We talk about things like consent. We talk about things like boundaries, because you can teach that at any age. You can teach about safety, right? We don't have to mention anything about abuse to be able to teach those concepts and make sure that they are growing up with a healthy mindset. So that's what we do with the primary prevention. And then on the other side of it, so whenever it comes to the primary prevention, we have another 4 levels. There's, depending on where you look, there's more, but these are the 4 basic ones. So you have the individual level. So this is somebody's personal history, how they grew up. You have the relationship level. What are the relationships with others like? Teachers, parents, siblings, friends. Community level. So this is where we're looking at entire communities. So I was telling them before I came up here, Bay Area Turning Point is working in collaboration with Webster Police Department right now. And I don't remember if any of y'all were at this meeting, but we created what's called the Bay Area Collaborative Care Coalition. I was trying to remember the correct order. I'm the one that came up with the name, and I can't remember the order. This is basically a multi-agency. It's based off a model that's in Galveston called Cops and Clergy. So they get all the police officers in the area, they get the clergy members in the area, they bring them together in collaboration to talk about what needs are not being met in the community and how they can work together to meet those needs. Because again, not everybody feels comfortable going to the police. They might feel comfortable coming to the church though. So the church can bring those concerns to the police, and then the police and the church work together. Churches, it's not just one church, churches work together in collaboration to try to meet the needs of the community members. So that's what we're looking at as far as community level goes. And I told them over here that I'm happy to send the information for the next meeting, which should be November 13th. And then the societal level is the last level. So we kind of, as we explain this, we kind of compare these different levels to a tree. The individual level would be the branches. Branches you can very easily bend, snap, change in some way. Sorry, not the branches, the leaves. Leaves are individual, branches are the relationship level. Still very, not easy, but easier to change. But once you get to the community level, where you're working with entire communities, that's the trunk of the tree, which is a lot more resilient. It takes everybody, not just Melissa at Bay Area Turning Point, not just Melissa's team, not even just Bay Area Turning Point, not even just the domestic violence organizations. It takes everybody in order to eliminate essentially domestic violence and sexual assault, which we would be nice to see one day. Really, we're trying to reduce some of those risk factors that will lead to it. But the societal level is the roots. Those are often invisible. They're often not seen. These are things like gender inequality, like racism, like all the isms that you know about, the things that are a lot harder to tackle. But it's important that we are working on that level as well, because if you think about a tree, if the roots are dead and rotting, then what happens to the rest of the tree? Yes. You can work on all those other levels, but if the roots are not healthy, it's not going to save that tree. And so that's what we have to work on, is the societal portion of things. We have to work on all these levels simultaneously if we ever want to see an end to domestic and sexual violence. So how can you support survivors? Again, you want to keep in mind safety for yourself and for them. So again, while you may be throwing out tips all day, every day, and they're just like, no, that's not going to work, there is a reason that they are saying that. It's not just because they don't want to do it, it's because that might not be safe for them. We might think it's safe, but they might understand a little bit better, since they're in that situation, that it might not be safe for them. So, but also, what I tell people too, and part of bystander intervention, you can't always personally involve yourself, because you have to keep an eye out for your own safety. You have to make sure that you're not putting yourself in harm's way, and if you are, you understand the risks that are involved with it. So some of the ways that you can support survivors, you want to try to see if you can approach them privately and express your concerns as observations, not accusations. You want to listen actively and without judgment. How many of y'all are familiar with the concept of active listening? I know I am still extremely guilty of this, but a lot of times whenever we're in conversation with people, we're listening to them and already thinking of our response, right? Instead of just listening to what they have to say and then formulating our response. Active listening is that second part. Listening to what they say and then formulating a response from there, versus forming our opinion or our judgment before we even know the whole story. Collaborating with church leadership. So if somebody's in a situation, you don't know how to handle it, get with the church leadership. Because most of them know how to get in touch with us, who can definitely come in and assist. You want to assist the survivor with safety planning, or planning for safety, or refer them to us. Like I said, we collaborate with them on creating their safety plan. We also know that safety plan might change every time we talk to them, based on changes in the situation. And then you just want to become familiar with the resources in the area. So you have us right up the road. We've got United Way, which is right over here. We're an affiliate of United Way, but United Way covers everything. They cover domestic violence, they cover homelessness, they cover financial problems, they cover rental assistance, they cover all the things. They are a fantastic resource. Know some of the other groups that are going on. I know you were telling me about the community hub that's going to be happening here. We were so excited about that. They were telling us that at the Bay Area Collaborative Care Coalition meeting, which I would love for us to get involved in. But there's different community groups that can be involved in keeping somebody safe. So lastly, before we go to a little tiny group discussion, like a 2-3 minute group discussion, I do want to talk about the services that we offer. A lot of people that are familiar with us consider us a women's shelter. I try to gently correct that. We're not a women's shelter. While we do have a shelter, it's not just for women. It is for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And that includes men and children. So while that is one of the many services that we offer, we've got a 24-hour hotline. So this is where we're providing that immediate crisis intervention to people. We're creating that initial safety plan with the survivor that's calling us, and we're trying to get them connected with services. We were talking about this at the table. We provide 24-hour accompaniments, meaning if somebody needs, for example, a sexual assault exam, we will meet them at the hospital. We have advocates on call 24 hours a day that will meet them at the hospital to be there as a support system while they're getting those exams done, because that can be a very scary process. And so it would help to have a friendly face and somebody that's going to be with you through all the other steps that you might be needing to go through with this case. Crisis intervention services, this again is helping them mitigate that initial crisis, getting them connected with services, talking about the safety. Counseling services, we provide individual and family counseling. We do not provide counseling for offenders. We don't provide any services for offenders. There are places that provide those battery intervention and prevention programs. We do not. But if an offender calls us, we're not just going to hang up in their face. We're going to refer them to a place that does have intervention programs for them, because we do want them to get the help too, especially if they're reaching out seeking help for their abusive behavior. We want to get them connected with somebody, because we don't want them to be abusive anymore. And if they're reaching out for help, they don't want to be like that anymore. So we do refer them to places that will provide those services. But with the counseling, we try to use different forms. We use art, we use sand tray therapy, we use doll houses, because especially with children, they may not know how to formulate in words what they're feeling or what's happened to them. So they will utilize play therapy so the children are able to communicate those things to them. We also offer support groups. So we do individual counseling, but we also do group counseling. I believe I mentioned our housing program. This is not the shelter, contrary to popular belief. Whenever people tell me, like, I want to learn more about housing, I'm going to this program, and they're talking about shelter. I'm like, wait a minute, what? No, our housing program is rental assistance. And we actually just got a large grant, thank you. Not like saying thank you up above. We got a very large grant that's going to allow us to add, I believe, 25 additional units to house people. But this is where we provide them rental assistance, which we can provide for up to 2 years depending on funding. So we can help them pay their rent, pay their utilities until they are able to become financially stable and self-sufficient. And they have caseworkers that work with them on a regular basis. We have our education and prevention, that's my department, where we come out, we provide education, we talk about our services. I tell people I will train on it. If I can tie it to domestic violence and sexual assault and it's just really not out of the scope of what we can do, like we can't talk about legal stuff a whole lot, because then that crosses into the territory of attorneys, which we are not. But for the most part, if you want education on anything that I can somehow tie in domestic violence or sexual assault, we will provide education on it. And we customize every presentation that we do. And then we talked about what prevention is. That's another thing that my team works on, is trying to either collaborate with or create new programs to try to address some of these risk factors at an early stage. We do have our shelter. It is a confidential location for the safety of the survivors. We can house up to 72 men, women, and children. We have food services through there. We provide 3 meals a day, 3 snacks a day, all nutritious or nutritious ingredients in order to create a nutritious meal. We have an on-site childcare. We also have children's services, which is where we have our caseworkers that will work with children that are needing some of those additional services. All of the services that we offer at our Crisis Intervention Center, which is our admin building, are available to residential clients and non-residential, meaning people in the shelter and people outside the shelter. So they also have access to counseling and victim advocacy. And then, let's see, what did I forget there? Casework. They do work with caseworkers to help them set goals to get back to self-sufficiency and eventually transition out of our shelter either into our housing program or transition onto their own. Sometimes they don't come through the housing program, but a lot do transition from the housing or from the shelter to the housing. And then lastly, we have victim advocacy. These are advocates that will help them with some of the legal side of things, assuming that the legal side of things aren't drifting into attorney territory. But things like protective orders, like I talked about before, crime victims compensation, which is a fund through the state that can help reimburse expenses incurred due to a crime, address confidentiality program, also through the state, which can help them make sure that their address is confidential. And so whenever mail's coming through for court, things like that, it goes through Austin, and then it gets delivered to a P.O. box. So their abuser is not able to look up the new address that they've relocated to. So they help with things like that, and then they also get them connected with other community resources for things that we may not provide. Another thing that we do provide for people, we do have, it's actually our sexual assault coordinator is certified to do this. We can help them apply for SNAP benefits. So we get them connected with what we can within the agency, and then we connect them with other resources outside of the agency. We always get a release of information, so we can also advocate on their behalf if they're a little overwhelmed or not sure what to say to the people that they are trying to work with. So that was a lot of information that we covered there. How can you get involved? These are just some basic things. You can make a donation, you can host a drive, you can participate in prevention programs, attend awareness events. At the front there, I have a calendar which has some of our events for the month, and also on that sign-in sheet, which if you don't mind signing in either on the QR code or on that sheet for our reporting purposes, there's also an area where you can say what event you might be interested in, and you can put your email in there and we can send you an invitation. So we have several events throughout the month, whether it just be awareness. Actually, our big fundraising event is over, so it's more just awareness events at this point, which are all free and open to the community. So if you're interested, please provide your email. And then we also have volunteer opportunities. You can find all of this on our website. That QR code there just brings you to our website, so you can find more of that information. But a lot of people ask, what are some prevention opportunities that are available, or how can we get involved with prevention? Because a lot of people want to help, but they don't know how. So some of the things, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but just to give y'all an idea of what prevention can look like. It can be as simple as sharing our posts on social media. You can follow us at Bay Area Turning Point on Facebook, Bay Area Turning Point Inc. on Instagram, but it can be as easy as sharing our educational posts or fundraising posts, anything that we make. Any kind of faith-based education where you're integrating violence prevention, probably healthy relationships, consent, boundaries, kind of like what I was talking about, in an age-appropriate manner with maybe Sunday school activities. Training programs are always great. Youth ministries are great to teach those things, but not just us teach them, but have them really drive the program. There's peer support networks, coalition building. That's why I brought up the new coalition that we created in conjunction with Webster PD, because it is going to mainly be police officers or law enforcement and clergy members, churches, and it's open to anybody. Now, we did ours a little bit different and included service providers too, because we wanted to really be interconnected, but it is primarily going to be driven by law enforcement and clergy. Those are just some of the things: advisory committees, event planning committees, policy advocacy, and really what that looks like is whenever legislative sessions come around, we will provide a lot of information, reaching out to representatives, supporting or opposing bills that are in place. We did a lot of that this session. A lot of great things got passed that really helped the movement. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, but like I said, I wasn't going to go through all of those, because what I would like for you to do for about a minute or two is discuss at your tables what you would be willing to do. After talking tonight, what is one thing that you're walking away with that you would be willing to do? So let's take like maybe 2 minutes to do that.
Are people allowed to be a sponsor to abused women/families? Can we take them into our own home?
So we do not have a program set up like that. I would say if you choose to do that, do so.
What was the question?
I'm sorry.
Oh, use the mic.
I thought I was loud, and I guess I wasn't. Are people allowed to be a sponsor to abused women/families? And can we take them into our own homes? So sponsor someone and let them just move in for a while.
So what I was saying is we do not have a program like that. We cannot say, yes, you can do this through our agency. If you were to do something like that, it would be on your own. I would say look into the risks and benefits of it. Yes, you're opening up your home to somebody who is in need, but you also have to look out for your own safety. So, you know, this is kind of one of those hard pills to swallow. Yes, we want to help people, but if you don't know that person, you don't know them. Now, would you allow a random stranger to come live with you? You have to kind of think of it that way. Even if they were not in an abusive situation, would you allow a random stranger to come live in your home? Because that's essentially what you're doing, is allowing somebody to come live in your home. We are not going to jeopardize the safety of anybody who's a survivor or anybody that is willing to help survivors, so that's why we don't sponsor any kind of program like that. But if you are going to do that, which we do have people, tell us that they're doing it all the time, but please make sure that you're looking at the risks that could come along with that.
Is it still the case that if the victim chooses not to press charges against the abuser, law enforcement is powerless to arrest or prosecute the abuser?
Not necessarily, and it's not law enforcement that would do it, it would be the DA. Law enforcement's hands are actually a lot more tied than people think they are, but the DA essentially is the one that can pick up charges and can prosecute whether the victim wants to drop the charges or not, depending on how severe the crime is. They look at a number of different things. Now, they have passed laws very recently, within actually just this last session, where the victim does have the right to confer with the prosecutor. Something to understand is the prosecutor does not represent the victim. The prosecutors represent the state. And so they're looking out for the state's best interest. And if they believe that it's in the state's best interest to prosecute a violent criminal, they are going to do so, whether the victim wants them to or not. But the victim now does have the right to confer with the prosecutor and talk about the impact that it could possibly have on them, and have the prosecutor take that into consideration.
If it's my house, how do I make the abuser
Make the user what?
abuser leave?
Make the abuser leave. That can be a little tricky. I would say get law enforcement involved. If is it being alerted if somebody is a victim of domestic abuse and it's their home?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where it can get a little tricky, and we're actually dealing with a couple of cases like this right now. If the abuser has mail that goes there, if it looks like that they are living there, it's going to be very hard to get them to leave. Unfortunately, sometimes law enforcement, us, are powerless to do anything about that. They are trying to tighten laws around that to where you can remove an abuser or terminate a lease. But again, if the abuser's been living there, they're getting mail sent there, it's going to be hard to remove them.
This question might give us an opportunity to get some stats on the abuse across the society. But the question is domestic abuse happening at Clear Lake UMC?
I can't give a solid yes or no to that, but what I can tell you is that it does occur to 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. So I can almost guarantee you that there is somebody within this congregation that is experiencing abuse. Now, if somebody were to call us and say, hey, I'm a member at Clear Lake United Methodist Church, I can't tell y'all that they called us because we take confidentiality very seriously. But I can tell you that there are probably people that attend this church that are going through abusive situations, and they may be afraid to tell people. They may be hiding it. So that's why it's important to have the education so you do know what signs to look out for and how you might be able to approach that conversation, but also know that they may not be willing to have that conversation just yet. So being patient.
2 more questions, and the first one is mine. So, if you walk through someone trying to leave an abusive situation and they keep going back, right? What, to my mind, I always want a metric. Well, has this person gone X number of days without doing this, or have they achieved this? Is there some what advice can you give about telling your friends, well, unless they have achieved X, Y, and Z, we don't need to talk about reestablishing that relationship or something? How would you address that?
Are you asking, like, how do you help them leave the relationship?
How do we keep them from going back?
So that's also a tricky one, and a lot of people don't like the answer to this one. You can't stop them from going back. You can't. That's where it is important to be a supportive friend, listening without judgment, but also understanding that leaving is the most dangerous time for somebody. In 2023, we lost 205 individuals to infant partner homicide. About 52% of those individuals were seeking help to try to leave. What's scarier is this past year in 2024, I cannot remember if it's 167 or 169, it's one of those two, and they haven't published the report yet. But we're either 167 or 169 individuals were killed due to infant partner homicide in Texas last year. About 47 of those were here in Harris County. 75% were trying to leave. 75% were trying to leave or had left. So whenever we're talking about how do you stay away, it may not be safe for them too. But there's also a lot of things to take into consideration and a lot of other barriers. That financial abuse, that's something that we have to look at, is that financial abuse. How are you going to secure the funds to be able to be self-sufficient on your own? You have to look at the effects that the abuse might have. So one thing I was mentioning when we were talking about the power and control wheel, whenever, let's just use the example that the abuser constantly tells you that you're worthless and you can't survive without them. You start to believe that once you're told that so many times, right? There are cultural values that keep people in a relationship. There's a lot of cultures that don't believe in divorce. And so there's a lot of cultures that believe that the woman holds the family relationship, that the woman holds the family together. And if they are the glue and they leave and the family falls apart, it's their fault. A lot of women are told, and men are told, that if they end the relationship, it's their fault. That the demise of the family is their fault. So there are multiple barriers to look at, and that's where that conversation goes a little deeper. But I do agree with, you can help them set goals to try to stay out of that relationship. But on average, do you know how many times it takes to leave an abusive relationship for good?
6.
10.
Y'all are like right around it. 7 to 9 times. 7 to 9 times. So understanding that as well is very important in trying to help somebody. Now, what I will say is sometimes you have to look out for yourself too. You have to look out for yourself. That's where I was talking about that self-care and that self-compassion, because we do start to experience that vicarious trauma. And we have to look out for ourselves too. Unfortunately, this is what a lot of survivors experience whenever being separated from their support system, because sometimes those that aren't in the situation and are pulled into it, they've had enough by a certain point. But that's where it gets a little tricky, and that's where you have to make a decision about how you're going to take care of yourself and help take care of your friend or family member.
So this is a great last question. What would you like to see coming out of Clear Lake United Methodist Church in the efforts to prevent and treat domestic violence? And they specifically gave a 1, 2, 3.
I see that.
Yeah.
Y'all want a solid 1, 2, 3. Well, I think we've kind of talked about a lot of things that we're already doing. The Bay Area Collaborative Care Coalition, I'd love to see some of y'all's faces there. Actually, I'm probably not going to be there in November because that's around my birthday, and that's usually whenever I take off. But I would love to see y'all at those meetings. I think that that's really going to bring the community closer together. It's going to help network, and it's going to help really see kind of across different sectors what everybody's seeing as far as community needs. Because whenever it comes to violence prevention, those risk and protective factors I was talking about go way beyond just, what am I trying to say? The healthy relationships, consent, boundary education. It's affordable housing. It's access to transportation. It's access to health care. It's access to mental health care. So there are things that we don't provide that other people might have access to that can make more accessible. Or people might have the influence. And so that's something we would love to see y'all at and talk about how we can do that. I know y'all were talking about the community hub. I would love to partner on that because I feel like that's really going to be helpful. And then I know we've talked about possibly hosting youth groups for at-risk youth. Having at-risk youth come and letting us talk to them and letting us kind of help them navigate through some of these things and help them get onto a healthy path. That's going to help turn somebody that might be experiencing these risk factors into somebody that can add more protective factors to their life that will help them be successful in life. So I would say right now those are the top 3 things. Also, just adding one more, come to our events. Come to our events, check out our social media, share our information. We post a lot of educational information on social media, and we're trying to move more to videos versus just posts. So y'all probably gonna see my face and one of my coordinators' faces on our social media a little bit this month because we're trying to make that a little different. But we are always trying to educate. So, all right.
All right. That's one thing.